The power of listening and reading. Hello, my dear students. Do you know what I love most about teaching English? It is watching my students transform their lives one word at a time. Today, I want to share a secret with you, a secret that can make learning English faster, easier, and even more fun. Let me start with a little story. A few years ago, I had a student named Lily. Lily was shy and she always said, "Teacher, I cannot learn English. It is too hard for me." But I told her, "Lily, don't worry about being perfect. Just listen, read, and enjoy the process. The results will surprise you." And guess what? She did just that. Every day she watched videos on YouTube, simple ones with subtitles. She listened carefully, repeated the sentences, and even wrote them down. In a few months, Lily was not just speaking English, she was telling jokes in English. This is the power of listening and reading. It is like planting a small seed. At first, it feels like nothing is happening, but if you keep watering it every day, it will grow into a big, beautiful tree. So, my friends, I am here to tell you, you can do this. No matter how scared or nervous you feel, every step you take is a step forward. Are you ready to start? Let's learn together. One video, one word, one sentence at a time. Why listening and reading are like magic. Let me tell you about one of my students, Emma. When Emma first joined my class, she couldn't even introduce herself in English. She would sit quietly in the back, avoiding eye contact. One day I asked her, "Emma, what is your biggest dream?" She hesitated, then whispered, "To speak English fluently. But I'm afraid." I smiled and said, "Emma, let's start with something small. Tonight I want you to go home, open YouTube, and find a video about something you love. It can be cooking, music, or even funny animals. Watch it with subtitles. Just listen and read. Can you do that?" The next day, Emma came back with a spark in her eyes. "Teacher, I watched a video about making chocolate cake," she said. "I didn't understand everything, but I heard new words like stir and bake." This was just the beginning. Every evening, Emma spent 15 minutes watching videos and reading subtitles. Slowly, she started recognizing more words. Then she began repeating phrases aloud. One day in class, she surprised everyone by saying, "Yesterday, I made a chocolate cake. It was delicious." Building confidence through stories. Another student, Leo, had a different challenge. He worked as a taxi driver and had little free time. One evening, he told me, "I can't sit and study. I'm always driving." I thought for a moment and said, "Leo, your car can be your classroom. Download podcasts or listen to English songs while driving. Don't just hear them. Listen carefully. Focus on the words and their sounds." Leo was skeptical at first. "How can I learn just by listening?" he asked. But I encouraged him to try. A week later, Leo walked into class with a big smile. "Teacher," he said, "yesterday, a tourist got in my taxi. She spoke English, and I understood her. I even said, 'Welcome to our city.'" This moment was like a movie scene. Leo, once afraid of English, had started a conversation with a stranger. He told me later, it felt like magic. The words I heard in the podcast came to my mind, and I used them. Then there was Nathan, a young man who loved history. He spent hours watching documentaries on YouTube with subtitles. At first, he paused every 5 seconds to check the meaning of new words. It was frustrating, and he almost gave up. But I told him, Nathan, don't stop. Even if you don't understand everything, keep going. Focus on the big picture. One evening, Nathan called me, his voice trembling with excitement. Teacher, he said, I watched a documentary about the Roman Empire. When the narrator said, the soldiers marched through the city, I understood it without subtitles. The key to success. What do these stories teach us? Every student is different. Some learn by listening, others by reading, and many by doing both. The key is consistency. Emma, Leo, and Nathan all had one thing in common. They didn't stop. They kept listening, reading, and practicing every day. Now, I want to ask you, what is your dream? What kind of videos do you love? Start with something you enjoy. Listen, read, and repeat. It may feel slow at first, but remember, every small step brings you closer to your goal. English is best learned by combining, listening with note-taking. Let me share the story of Daniel. Daniel was a university student who loved science. He wanted to understand English lectures on YouTube, but felt lost every time he tried. One day, I gave him a simple strategy. I said, Daniel, take a notebook and a pen. When you listen to a video, write down every word or phrase that you hear more than once. Then look up the meaning of these words and try to use them in a sentence. He followed this advice. The first video he watched was about space exploration. He heard words like orbit, gravity, and mission multiple times. He wrote them down, learned their meanings, and practiced saying sentences like, the Earth orbits the Sun, and astronauts face zero gravity in space. A week later, Daniel surprised the class by giving a short presentation about space in English. His confidence grew because he wasn't just listening. He was actively engaging with the language, using short stories to build vocabulary and grammar. Now, let me tell you about Hannah, a student who loved reading but struggled with grammar. I suggested a simple method. Hannah, find short stories in English with audio. Listen to the story first, then read along with the text. Pay attention to how sentences are formed and how words are used together. Hannah chose a story about a brave little bird learning to fly. At first, she only understood simple words like bird, sky, and fly. But as she listened and read more, she began noticing patterns. The bird flew into the sky. It was scared at first, and then it tried again. One day, Hannah came to class and said, Teacher, I wrote my own story. She shared a beautiful tale about a kitten exploring the forest. Her grammar wasn't perfect, but her sentences were full of life and creativity. The power of repetition and visualization. Another powerful method is repetition combined with visualization. Let me introduce you to Victor. He was a chef who wanted to learn English to communicate with international customers. I asked Victor, "What is your favorite dish to cook?" He laughed and said, "Spaghetti carbonara." So I gave him a challenge. Find a cooking video in English about spaghetti carbonara. Watch it 3 times. The first time, just listen. The second time, write down the steps. The third time, repeat the instructions aloud as if you are the chef. Victor loved the idea. He found a video, listened carefully, and practiced saying sentences like, "First, boil the pasta. Then, add the sauce to the pan." After a few days, he invited me to his restaurant and proudly explained the entire recipe to me in English. Why these methods work. These stories show us something important. Learning English is not about being perfect. It's about trying, practicing, and finding joy in the process. When you listen, read, and take notes, you are training your brain to think in English. Just like Daniel, Hannah, and Victor, you can start small. Choose a topic you love. Listen to a video and write down the words or sentences that stand out to you. Repeat them, visualize them, and make them your own. Your next step. Now, it's your turn. Take a moment to think. What is one thing you love? Is it cooking, traveling, music, or something else? Find a video about it in English. Listen to it today, write down what you learn, and try using it in a sentence. Remember, every small effort counts. You are not just learning English. You are opening a door to new opportunities, new friendships, and a whole new world. The case of the mispronounced word. One of my students, Elliot, was a big fan of technology. He loved watching videos about the latest gadgets. One day he came to class looking embarrassed. "Teacher," he said, "I think I said something wrong to my boss." "What happened?" I asked. Elliot explained that he was watching a video about wireless headphones. The narrator kept saying the word Bluetooth. Elliot thought it was pronounced Bluetooth, and during a meeting, he confidently said, "Our company needs to invest in Bluetooth technology." His boss looked confused and asked, "What's Bluetooth?" The entire class burst into laughter as Elliot told this story. But it didn't end there. I smiled and said, "Elliot, don't worry." Mispronouncing words is part of the process. Let's fix it. We played the video again in class, pausing each time the narrator said, "Bluetooth." Elliot repeated it until he got it right. A week later, he proudly shared, "I had another meeting, and this time I said it correctly." His boss smiled and said, "Good job." The chocolate cake confusion. Another memorable student was Mia, a passionate baker. She started learning English because she wanted to watch baking tutorials online. One day, Mia came to class with a puzzled expression. "Teacher," she said, "I tried to bake a cake, but something went wrong." "What happened?" I asked. She explained that the video she watched used the word batter, but she thought the baker said butter. Instead of mixing flour and sugar into a batter, she added a huge block of butter to her cake. The result was a disaster, a greasy, inedible mess. We couldn't stop laughing, but I told Mia, Mistakes like this are funny, but they're also great teachers. Let's listen to the video again. As we replayed the video, Mia learned the difference between batter and butter. She practiced saying both words out loud and even wrote them down with pictures in her notebook. A week later, she brought a perfectly baked cake to class and said, "This time, I got the batter right." The case of the word that sounded funny. Then there was James, a quiet student who rarely spoke in class. One day he surprised everyone by saying, "Teacher, I learned a new word from a video." "Great," I said. "What's the word?" James hesitated, then said, "It's squirrel." I smiled. "That's a good word. Why did you choose it?" James explained that he was watching a nature documentary, and the narrator kept saying, "Squirrel." At first, James thought it was pronounced square L, so he kept saying it wrong. The funny part? His younger brother, who spoke fluent English, couldn't stop laughing every time James said it. "I didn't understand why he was laughing," James said. "But then I watched the video again. I slowed it down and noticed the narrator pronounced it squirrel. I practiced it until my brother said, 'Finally, you got it.'" From that day on, squirrel became a running joke in our class. James even made up a sentence. "The squirrel is quicker than my tongue." When subtitles saved the day. One of the funniest moments involved a student named Lucas who worked in customer service. He often dealt with international clients, and his biggest fear was misunderstanding them. Lucas shared a story about a phone call with an English-speaking client. The customer said, "I have an issue with my receipt," but I thought he said, "I have an issue with my recipe." I laughed. "And what did you say?" Lucas replied, "I said, 'I'm sorry, sir. I don't know how to cook.'" The client laughed, and so did Lucas when he realized his mistake. After the call, he started watching customer service training videos on YouTube with subtitles. He focused on similar words like receipt and recipe, repeating them aloud until he could hear the difference. A month later, Lucas confidently handled another call, saying, "I'll email you a copy of your receipt." The client responded, "Your English is great." Lucas couldn't stop smiling. The jelly mix-up. Finally, there was Olivia, a student who loved British culture. She often watched videos about British food, but struggled with some terms. One day she told me, "Teacher, I tried to make trifle, but I made a big mistake." "What happened?" I asked. Olivia explained that the video said to use jelly, but she didn't realize that in British English, jelly means gelatin, not the sweet spread Americans call jelly. Instead of making a smooth, layered dessert, she spread strawberry jam all over her trifle. "It looked terrible," she said, laughing. We watched the video together, and Olivia practiced saying jelly and jam until she could confidently use both words. Later, she brought a beautifully made trifle to class and joked, "This time, no jam." Lessons from these stories. These funny and dramatic moments taught my students and me that mistakes are part of the journey. Whether it's mispronouncing a word, confusing similar sounding terms, or making hilarious errors, Every experience is an opportunity to learn and grow. The next time you watch a video, listen carefully, repeat what you hear, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Remember, every word you learn is a step closer to fluency. The journey continues. Learning English is like planting a seed. At first, it's small and fragile, but with water, sunlight, and care, it grows into a strong, beautiful tree. Watching videos, listening to stories, and practicing every day are like the water and sunlight your English tree needs. Remember Elliot, who turned his pronunciation mistake into a success? Or Mia, who learned the difference between batter and butter through her baking adventures? Each of them started with confusion and laughter, but ended with confidence and skill. You can do the same. Every video you watch, every word you repeat, and every mistake you make brings you closer to fluency. Don't be afraid to try, to laugh at yourself, and to keep going, even when it feels hard. Imagine the day when you can confidently watch any video without subtitles, speak fluently with anyone, even share your own story in English. That day will come, step by step, as long as you stay curious and determined. So, start today. Find a video about something you love, a hobby, a dream, or a funny topic, and dive in. Listen carefully, repeat the words, and enjoy the journey. And remember my favorite saying, a mistake is just a lesson in disguise. Your English tree is waiting to grow tall and strong. Let's make it happen together.